I found a diary that knew my whole life, until I got to the last page. Some things wait for you. They lie dormant in the clutter of other people's lives, tucked away in the stale air of attics and the damp quiet of basements, patient as a predator. You don't find them. They find you. I found mine on a cracked folding table under the oppressive August sun, wedged between a chipped porcelain doll with a dead-eyed stare and a box of someone's tarnished military medals. A yard sale. The whole street smelled of scorched asphalt and cut grass. The woman watching over the collection of discarded memories had a face like old parchment, thin and crisscrossed with 1,000 tiny lines. Her smile was a pale, rigid crescent that didn't touch her eyes. Her eyes were fixed on the street, watching the heat haze shimmer, until I reached for the book. Then they snapped to me. The smile didn't move, but the stillness in her gaze was absolute. It was a diary, bound in dark, cracked leather, the color of dried blood. It felt strangely warm in my hands, a low, persistent heat that seemed to pulse against my skin. A simple brass clasp held it shut, green with age, and it was clear from the worn groove that it hadn't worked in a very long time. I ran a thumb over the cover. No name, no initials, just the smooth, worn texture of the leather. Curiosity got the better of me, and I pried it open. The pages released a scent that was both familiar and alien, not just mold and dust, but something else. Something like cold smoke and dried flowers. And the pages weren't empty. They were filled, edge to edge, with a spidery, frantic script in faded black ink. The woman leaned forward, her movement so sudden it made me flinch. Her voice was a dry rasp, a whisper of dead leaves skittering across pavement. $2. It felt less like a price and more like a pronouncement. I handed her the crumpled bills, and the way her dry, bony fingers brushed mine sent a shiver through me that had nothing to do with the heat. She didn't put the money in the cash box. She just closed her fist around it, her gaze never leaving the diary in my hands. I felt an overwhelming urge to put it back down, to walk away and forget the whole thing. But I didn't. I clutched it to my chest and walked back to my car, the woman's unblinking stare burning into the back of my neck the entire way. At home, I tossed the diary onto the kitchen table and forgot about it for a few hours. It was just a strange impulse buy, a piece of someone else's history. Later that night, with a beer sweating condensation onto the wood, I picked it up again. I started flipping through the pages, expecting the mundane ramblings of a stranger. A chronicle of forgotten loves and petty grievances. What I found was my own life. At first, it was just a flicker of bizarre coincidence. An entry dated from my 7th birthday described a scraped knee, a fall from a bicycle with blue and yellow streamers on the handlebars. I'd had a bike just like that. I laughed it off. Then I read about the time I stole a $5 bill from my mother's purse to buy a specific comic book, the one with the holographic cover, and how I'd hidden the change in the hollowed-out base of a plastic trophy. My heart stuttered. No one knew that. I'd taken that secret to what I thought would be my grave. I kept reading, a cold dread coiling in my stomach. It was all there. Every shameful secret, every private triumph, every whispered fear I'd never given voice to. The cruel nickname I had for my 4th grade teacher. The first girl I ever kissed, behind the bleachers at the homecoming game, and the lie I told my friends about it afterward. The recurring nightmare I had as a child, where all my teeth would turn to sand and pour out of my mouth. It was a perfect, horrifying ledger of my soul. I slammed the book shut, my breath coming in ragged gasps. This had to be a prank. A sick, elaborate, impossible prank. But who? Who could possibly know these things? I lived alone. My parents were gone. My circle of friends was small, and my secrets were my own. My hands were trembling as I opened it again, turning to the very last written page, desperate for a clue, a name, anything. The ink on this page was different. It was darker, sharper. It looked fresh. August 28, 10:47 p.m. He sits at his kitchen table, the condensation from his beer bottle forming a perfect circle on the wood. He's pretending this is a joke, a coincidence. He's pretending his heart isn't trying to hammer its way out of his ribs. He swallows, the sound loud in the quiet room. In a moment, he'll get up and check the front door, even though he knows he locked it. He did it twice. I shot up from my chair, a strangled cry catching in my throat. I looked at the front door, the deadbolt gleaming in the low light. I had locked it. Twice. It was a nervous habit I'd had for years. The entry continued. He doesn't know what's coming. He doesn't know that if he just stays quiet, in exactly 3 minutes, he'll hear the scratching begin. The book fell from my numb fingers, landing on the floor with a soft thud. My eyes were glued to the digital clock on the microwave. 10:48. My entire world had shrunk to the glowing green numbers and the suffocating silence of my own home. I didn't breathe, I just listened. 10:49. The silence stretched, becoming a physical presence, pressing in on me. I told myself it was nonsense. I was hallucinating, cracking up. Then the clock ticked over to 10:50, and the sound began. Scrah, ape, pause. Scrah, ape. It was coming from the front door, a low, rhythmic sound. It wasn't the frantic scratching of an animal, it was slow, deliberate, the sound of a single, dry fingernail being dragged slowly and purposefully down the wood. I backed away from the table, my legs shaking so violently I could barely stand. The sound went on for what felt like an eternity, then stopped as abruptly as it began, leaving a silence that was somehow worse. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the floor of my living room, my back pressed against the wall, watching the front door until the sun came up. The next morning, exhaustion battled with terror. In the harsh light of day, it all seemed less real. I convinced myself I'd been tired, that my mind had played a trick on me, filling in the blanks provided by that cursed book. I made toast, my hands still unsteady, and forced myself to eat. That's when I saw the diary, still lying on the floor where I'd dropped it. Against my better judgment, I picked it up. A new entry stared back at me. August 29, 8:02 a.m. He's telling himself it wasn't real. He's telling himself he imagined the noise at the door, that the strain of finding this book just made him suggestible. He's eating a piece of burnt toast and doesn't taste it. If he were paying attention, he might have noticed the shadow in the hallway just a moment ago, tall and thin. It was watching him chew. My head snapped toward the hallway. It was empty. A stripe of morning sun cut across the floorboards, but the air was cold. There was a lingering feeling, the distinct impression of a space recently occupied. The feeling of being watched. I threw the toast in the sink, my stomach churning. I decided I was done with it. I wouldn't open it again. I shoved the diary onto my nightstand, burying it under a stack of paperbacks. Out of sight, out of mind. That night, I fell into a deep, uneasy sleep, the kind that feels more like a heavy shroud than a rest. I had the dream again, the one from my childhood, the one the diary had already described. My father, who's been dead for 10 years, was sitting on the edge of my bed. He looked just as he did in the hospital, his skin waxy and translucent. He leaned close, and his voice wasn't his own. It was a low, guttural whisper, like the sound of wet soil being shoveled onto a coffin lid. "You can't shut it, son," he rasped. "It's already open." I woke up in a cold sweat, the words echoing in my ears. My eyes darted to the nightstand. The paperbacks I'd piled on top of the diary were scattered on the floor, and the diary itself was sitting on top, open. The ink on the newest page was still faintly glossy, not yet fully dry. It had described my dream, word for word. That was when I understood. It wasn't just recording my life. It wasn't just predicting things. It was connected to me, somehow. It knew my thoughts as they formed, my dreams as they flickered through my subconscious. The entries became more frequent, appearing even when the book was closed. I'd open it to find a new paragraph detailing the last 10 minutes of my life with chilling accuracy. And then, it started getting ahead of me. August 31, 6:44 p.m. He's thinking about ordering a pizza tonight. He's tired of cooking. He won't. He'll decide to make a salad instead to feel some semblance of control. While chopping a cucumber, the knife will slip. It's an old knife, and he's been meaning to sharpen it. The blood will well up on the tip of his index finger, a single, perfect crimson bead before it falls into the white porcelain of the sink. He will stare at it for a very, very long time. No, I said aloud to the empty room. Not happening. I defiantly grabbed my phone and pulled up the number for the local pizza place. My thumb hovered over the call button. But a wave of nausea rolled over me. The thought of greasy pizza was suddenly revolting. A salad, I thought. A salad sounds good. I stood at the counter, a cucumber in one hand, and my oldest, dullest knife in the other. I was being meticulous, my movements slow and deliberate. I was in control. I laughed. A short, sharp, humorless sound. See? Just a stupid book. The knife slipped. It wasn't a big cut, just a nick. But the blood welled up, a perfect crimson bead, and dripped, one slow drop, into the sink. I stared at it, a splash of vibrant red against the sterile white, and I couldn't look away. I was mesmerized. The diary hadn't been wrong about a single detail. That was the breaking point. This thing couldn't be real, but it was. It was a parasite, and it had burrowed into my life. I had to destroy it. On September 1st, I drove out to the state forest, the diary sitting on the passenger seat like a malevolent passenger. I found a clearing, a damp circle of earth surrounded by skeletal trees. I had a metal trash can and a can of lighter fluid. I tossed the book inside, doused it, and struck a match. The flame caught with a whoosh, engulfing the diary. I felt a surge of triumphant relief. It was over. But then, something impossible happened. The fire seemed to shrink away from the leather cover. Through the shimmering heat, I could see the pages. They weren't burning. The words were moving. The black ink was writhing, bleeding across the paper, multiplying like a virus. New sentences were forming faster than I could read them, spreading like black veins, filling every blank space until the entire book seemed to be vibrating with a dark energy. The fire went out, not with a sizzle, but with a sudden gasp, as if the book had inhaled the flames, leaving behind only a plume of cold, acrid smoke. The air in the clearing dropped 10 degrees. I reached in, my hand shaking, and picked it up. It was cool to the touch. And there, on the page it had fallen open to, was a fresh entry. September 1, 9:03 p.m. He tries to burn it. The attempt is pathetic. He thinks fire can destroy it, but he doesn't understand. Fear is its fuel. His terror is its ink. The more he resists, the more it writes. The more it writes, the stronger it becomes. He will never be free. I screamed, a raw, ragged sound of pure animal terror, and hurled the book as hard as I could. It tumbled through the air and landed in the damp leaves, falling open, and the pages, one by one, began to turn on their own, stirred by an unfelt wind. The sound was a dry, sibilant whisper, the sound of 100 voices all speaking at once, just on the edge of hearing. I ran. I sprinted back to my car, slammed the door, and drove away, not looking back. But I knew it was still there. I could feel it. And I knew it would find its way back to me. I found it on my doorstep the next morning, looking as if it had never been touched by fire. It's not just predicting things anymore. It shows me things. Glimpses of a future that feels both inevitable and terrifyingly malleable. Last night, I opened it, and a single chilling entry filled the page. September 2, 12:14 a.m. He's reading this by the light of his bedside lamp. He won't hear the faint creak as the window in the living room slides open. He won't see the pale hand that reaches through to pull back the curtain. He won't know she is in the house until she is standing in his doorway. I spent the entire night huddled in the corner of my bedroom, clutching the sharpest knife from my kitchen block. I watched the doorway, my eyes burning from exhaustion, every creak of the house sending a jolt of adrenaline through me. I didn't blink. I didn't move, nothing happened. Dawn broke, and with it came a fragile, tentative sense of relief. Maybe I had won. Maybe by knowing, by preparing, I had changed the outcome. I felt a sliver of hope for the first time in days. Trembling, I reached for the diary. The entry from last night was gone. In its place was a new one. September 2, 7:40 a.m. He stayed awake all night, clutching a knife like a child's toy. He thought that would be enough to protect him. He was so focused on the door, he didn't notice the new impressions in the deep pile of the carpet, the ones that lead from the hallway to the side of his bed, the ones that stop just inches from where he was sitting. My blood ran cold. I scrambled across the floor on my hands and knees, my breath catching in my throat. And I saw them, faint but undeniably there. Footprints. Not of a shoe, but of a bare, slender foot. They were damp, leaving behind a subtle, dark patch on the beige carpet. And they led right to the spot where my head would have been if I had been asleep in my bed. On my pillow, almost invisible against the white cotton, lay a single, long strand of pale, silvery hair. It's writing this now. Not me. My fingers are moving across the keyboard, but the words are appearing on the screen a fraction of a second before I think them. The diary is sitting open next to me, and the ink is flowing across its pages, a perfect mirror of what is materializing here. It's inside my head. It's moving my hands. I don't know why it's making me do this. Maybe it's a new kind of torture. Maybe if the story is told, shared with someone else, its focus will shift. Maybe it will release its grip on me. A desperate, foolish hope, I know. But it's the only one I have left. But the diary is already writing the next line. It knows my hope, and it's mocking me. The final entry for tonight is already written. It says, September 2, 9:58 p.m. He thinks this will save him. He thinks that by casting his story out into the world, he is freeing himself. He's so naive. He doesn't understand that he's not ending the story. He's just turning the page. All he has done is make you a part of it. You've just finished the prologue. And now, your own story is about to begin.